Larry, we're going down. I know it. 5 seconds later, Avianca Flight 052 crashed in John F. Kennedy International Airport, killing all 258 souls, including the flight crew. 9 hours before, when this flight took off from Medellin, Colombia, it seemed like just another routine flight. However, this flight was anything but routine. Captain Larry Caviedes of Colombia and First Officer Klotz had never flown together before, but during this flight, Captain Larry Caviedes was bushed. He was tired. And that's one of the contributing factors to this airplane crash. We will talk about more as we go on. But why couldn't First Officer Klotz tell the captain? Why couldn't he tell air traffic control that he was out of fuel? You see, Klotz is Korean. And in Korea, he had lots of levels of communication to contend with. Korea has 6 levels of communication, and depending on who you're talking to, you communicate a certain way. And when you're talking to someone who is in an authority position, you have to mitigate what you're saying. You have to make sure that they're honored in their position. No such thing in American English. In American English, we don't care who you are. We got something to say. We're saying it whether you're the street sweeper or whether you're the President of the United States. It makes no difference to us. As this plane was leaving Medellin, Colombia, they spent an inordinate amount of time on the tarmac, circling the airport, waiting to take off, as opposed to just taking off when it was their turn. As they approached Kennedy Airport, it seemed Kennedy Airport was also crowded. So they flew around the airport, did several missed approaches is what they called it. When you go to land and you can't land, you have to try again. It's called a missed approach. 20 minutes before the plane crashed was the time for Klotz to say we're low on fuel and say it emphatically. But Klotz did not do that. 20 minutes before, it was his job to know that, but he didn't do it. That was the main reason for the crash. Caviedes was exhausted, was tired. That's another reason for the crash. You, me, may ask ourselves, why wouldn't you just say we're low on fuel? We'd have to go back to Klotz's childhood to begin to answer that question. When Klotz grew up in Korea, speaking to his teacher was an ordeal. Speaking to the man that owned the corner grocery store was an ordeal. Speaking to his parents was an ordeal. He had to address them just right. And as far as Klotz is concerned, he actually was doing his best to tell them what they needed to know the way he knew how to do it. In fact, another contributing factor was Larry Caviedes. He, towards the end of the flight, was so tired he couldn't exert the mental energy that it took to understand the English that the air traffic controllers was speaking to him and that Klotz was speaking to him. So much so he kept saying, please, repeat it to me. Say it to me in Spanish, please. Because Spanish was his native language. And the air traffic controller at JFK, they were notorious for being rude. And they were very good at what they did. But to someone like Klotz, their rudeness just tugged on his desire to be more respectful. 20 minutes before the flight, when they said to him, take a missed approach, and how are you doing with your fuel? Rather than saying, we are out of fuel and we need to land right now, Klotz said, okay, thank you very much. By the way, we are low on fuel. Hearing low on fuel is something that air traffic controllers hear all the time, and it means nothing to them. When Captain Caviatus said to Klotz, "Tell them we're in an emergency." Klotz did his best to tell them that they were in an emergency, but when the captain asked him, "Did you tell them that we were in an emergency?" Klotz simply said, "Yes, I told them, sir." "Yes, I told them, sir"? Is that all you had to say? If Klotz had simply advocated for himself more and made it very clear to the air traffic controllers, none of them would have died. I believe the main problem was the lack of standard communication. Teamwork and communication are critical in an airplane cockpit, as it is in your life and my life. However, one way that we can standardize the communication is have everybody speak the same language. In fact, the organization that monitors the airline industry in 1944, they got together and decided that English would be the language. If you were a pilot, if you were a first officer, if you were a navigator, and you were in the airline industry, you spoke English. Not just English, but you speak proficient English. And the reason your English would need to be proficient is that you would know, if you understood proficient English, that there is no necessary for 6 levels of communication. You would know that there's no need to mitigate your speech. You would know airline industry jargon cold. And situations like what we just described would not have happened. I am a huge advocate of making English a global language. And particularly in the last several months, I'm an advocate of that because I have been exposed to so many different languages doing things like this. In a Toastmasters meeting where everyone speaks different languages, come from different culture. I want to caution you, I'm not even talking about negating a person's culture. I'm not even talking about someone separating themselves from their culture. When you are with people in your culture, when you are with your own personal group, sure, that's fine. But in reality, in the real world we live in, where airplanes crash because people don't speak the right language, I say globalize the English language. I want to inspire you. If you're at the moment are not comfortable with your English, let's get more comfortable with it. Until next time, have a good time.